All right, so now I am live. So this is actually my first time doing this from my phone, and it is so clear. But with that being the case, if you guys don't know, lately going around, there has been a debate, and the debate has been, of course, on the age-old classic of the Trinity. And does the Bible mention the Trinity, and is the Trinity biblical? When will you go to hell if you don't believe in the Trinity? And if you don't believe in the Trinity, does that make you a heretic? And do these things even really matter? And so Stephen Bancarz and the Vigilant Christian Mario decided to take on Marcus Rogers. They decided to take him to task and have a debate, and the Vigilant Christian decided to make some videos on it. And Apologia Studios decided to take on Marcus Rogers and James White, and everybody is basically throwing shots at him and saying he's a heretic and saying he's wrong about oneness Pentecostalism, and he's dangerous, and et cetera, et cetera. Me, in my personal opinion, Marcus Rogers definitely is wrong, but Stephen Bancarz, the Vigilant Christian, and all of the other guys who were actually throwing shots at Marcus Rogers, they're actually wrong too. Which isn't a bad thing. It's not. They're not heretics. They're not dangerous. They're just very misinformed, and coming from people who are very passionate about what they believe. I can definitely understand why they responded in the way that they did, but they are incorrect. Marcus Rogers is incorrect. Stephen Bancarz is incorrect. The Vigilant Christian is incorrect. James White is incorrect. A lot of these people are very, very scholarly when it comes to the New Testament. But when you're looking at the Old Testament, which was the platform and the runway for how we actually got the Trinity today, you definitely need to do your scholarly due diligence in your studying so you can come to the right interpretation of the text. Now, as you guys know, when I look at the Bible, the Old Testament, from the context of an ancient Near Eastern Israelite. When you look at any historical text, you want to look at that text in the context of somebody who would have been a part of the audience that the author was writing to. So the authors of the Old Testament were not writing to me or you. We didn't exist yet. The authors of the Old Testament were not writing to people in 21st century America, North America, South America, Australia. These places didn't exist yet, and they had no recollection of their existence. So when I say they're all wrong, what exactly do I mean? Well, going back into the Old Testament, which actually paved the way for how we got the Trinity today, Jews didn't believe in the Trinity. Their Trinity did not exist. What Jews believed in a form of binitarianism. Jews believed in something called the two powers in heaven. So if you want to go and do some more research into that, there's a guy, I think his name is Siegel Allen, or Allen Siegel, I think, or something like that. And he was a rabbi, and he basically lays down in his work and in his dissertations that this two powers idea, it definitely was a school of thought in the Jewish community, but around the 2nd century, they actually had proclaimed it to be a heresy because, well, if you were Jew in the 1st and 2nd century, around the times where Christians were proclaiming Jesus, some of the verses I'm going to go over with you will be the exact same verses early Christians would go over with Jews. And with an early Christian being converted from Judaism to Christianity, they would know the verses in the Old Testament that will also align with the divinity of Jesus. And so in this Jewish school of thought, the two powers in heaven, there was thought to be, of course, God, Yahweh, who was all powerful and great and stuff like that. But there was a visible Yahweh who you could see, but there also was an invisible Yahweh who you couldn't see. But one's nature doesn't conflict with the other. It's not a form of polytheism. They didn't believe in two gods because both characters are both Yahweh. The visible embodied human is Yahweh, and the disembodied spirit Yahweh is also Yahweh. They are both Yahwehs, but then they're not. But then they're the same. It's kind of like how we have these arguments in church. Well, if Jesus is God, how can he be God if he's, has a human body? And is Jesus not God? And Jesus is God in the flesh, but he's not God the Father and stuff like that. And so it's not something new. What I want to show you is Genesis 19, chapter 19, verse 24. So this verse, it says, then the Lord, or you can say Yahweh, then Yahweh rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from Yahweh. Let me read that again. Then Yahweh rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from Yahweh. You have Yahweh raining down fire and ashes and brimstone and stuff like that on Sodom and Gomorrah from another Yahweh. There's two Yahwehs. There's the Yahweh that is in the heavens, and then there is the embodied human Yahweh. I'm not making this stuff up. This is in the text. This is what Jewish people believed. You can go and you can look this stuff up. But a lot of Christians don't know anything about this today. Going to Exodus 23. Exodus chapter 23, verse 20. This is God talking to Moses. He says, behold, I send an angel before you to guard you on the way and to bring you to the place that I have prepared. Pay careful attention to him and obey his voice. Do not rebel against him, for he will not pardon your transgression, for my name is in him. What is he talking about? What is he talking about with Moses? He's saying, Moses, I'm sending you a helper. I'm sending you an angel. And this angel is going to guard you in your ways and your paths. And you need to pay attention to him. Why? Because my name is in him. What does that mean? Because that guy I'm sending to help you and guard you is me. He's trying to get into Moses' head. He's trying to get the point across that I can be right there on earth, guarding and protecting you and helping you in a embodied human form, but I also can be in heaven. I also can be in the heavens on my throne, but I also can be there too. Because, well, God is that awesome, right? Going to Judges chapter 6. If you go to Judges chapter 6, this is the story with Gideon. And I'm starting off from verse 11. I'm going to skip some verses as I keep on going. But Judges chapter 6, verse 11, it says, now the angel of the Lord came and sat under the terebinth at Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abzerite, while his son Gideon was beating out wheat in the winepress. I'm going to skip some verses. And long story short, as a matter of fact, I think I just breezed over something that's very important. Starting at verse 11, it says, now the angel of the Lord came and sat under the terebinth. The angel of the Lord sat. He physically sat. This is not some disembodied spirit. This is a human. He sat under the terebinth. And so Gideon and him are having a discussion in the quotes. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, it's talking about Gideon. The Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor. And Gideon said to him, please, my Lord, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? And where are all his wonderful deeds that our fathers recounted to us? And they're having this conversation and they're talking back and forth. And so Gideon says this. He's talking to Yahweh. He says, if now I have found favor in your eyes, then show me a sign that it is you who speak with me. Please do not depart from here until I come to you and bring out my present and set it before you. And he said, this is Yahweh. Yahweh says, I will stay till you return. This is a embodied human saying, hey, I'm going to wait for you to go and get this present for me and, go get it. So Gideon went into his house and prepared a young goat and unleavened cakes for an ephah of flour. The meat he put in a basket, and the broth he put in a pot, and brought to him under the terebinth and presented them. And the angel of God said to him, take the meat and the unleavened cakes and put them in this rock, and pour the broth over them. And he did so. Then, notice this, the angel of the Lord reached out the tip of the staff. The angel of the Lord reached out the tip of the staff. And it keeps going. This was the staff that was in his hand and touched the meat and the unleavened cakes. And fire sprang up from the rock and consumed the meat and the unleavened cakes. And the angel of the Lord vanished from his sight. So this embodied messenger of the Lord, who is Yahweh, reaches out his hand, the stuff goes up in flames, and then he disappears. But look at this. If you keep on going, then Gideon perceived that he was the Lord. Gideon perceived that he was an angel of the Lord. And Gideon said, alas, O Lord, for now I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face. And the last part here, the last verse is, but the Lord said to him, peace be to you. But wait a minute. I thought Yahweh left. I thought Yahweh was gone. And so you also see, yes, there is this visible embodied human Yahweh who touches this stuff and then he disappears. But Yahweh's still there. The disembodied Yahweh is talking to him. So there's this conversation going on between the Yahweh who you can see and the Yahweh who you can't see. And there's two Yahwehs going back and forth. And you can't really understand what's going on. But the whole point that he's trying to make is this two powers idea. There's two. They're separate, but at the same time, they're not. One is Yahweh, one is not. But they are. It's complicated, but then it isn't. It's exactly how we talk about Jesus. Jesus is God, but yet he isn't. But then at the same time, he is. The answer is yes. Jesus is God, of course, because he's eternal with God. He shares likeness with God, etc. But Jesus is not God the Father. He's God, but he's not God. But then he is God. So that's exactly how it is with this two powers thing. He's Yahweh, but then he's not Yahweh, but then they are Yahweh, and it just keeps going back and forth. And this would be the mind of an ancient Near Eastern Jew. They had this idea of the two powers in heaven. So where did the idea of the Trinity come from? It evolved as Jewish religion and Jewish culture is evolving and going through different changes. The idea of the Trinity is being formed through the evolution of this culture. Actually, Encyclopedia Britannica actually put it way better than I ever could. But long story short, I'm just going to read a short excerpt from Encyclopedia Britannica. This is a very credible scholarly source. If you guys don't know anything about it, Britannica has it all. The Council of Nicaea in 1325 started the crucial formula for that doctrine in its confession that the Son is of the same substance as the Father, even though it said very little about the Holy Spirit. Over the next half century, Athanasius defended and refined the Nicene formula, and by the end of the 4th century, under the leadership of Basil of Caesarea, Gregory of Nyssa, and Gregory of all these weird names of Nazianzus, the doctrine of the Trinity took substantially the form it has maintained ever since. So over the course of about 4 centuries, by the end of the 4th century, you have the evolution of the Trinity, and it's been like that ever since. It says the doctrine of the Trinity took substantially the form it has maintained ever since. It is accepted in all of the historic confessions of Christianity, even though the impact of the Enlightenment decreased its importance. The idea of the Trinity is not something that you can see in the Old Testament. A lot of Christians, like I said, because they look at the Bible, when people open up the biblical text, they think that the Bible was written to them, for them, and by people who thought exactly like them. The people who wrote the Bible did not even know you existed. They had a completely different way of thinking. They had their own culture. They had their own way of thought. They had their own theology. And so it is not fair at all for you to impose your way of thinking onto their way of thinking. If you really want to get into biblical studies and you really want to get into ancient Near Eastern culture, you really want to get into the stuff about the Trinity, take a step back. And what you should do is study ancient Near Eastern culture. You need to understand stuff like the two powers of heaven, or cosmic geography, or the unseen realm, or a lot of the other beliefs that they had in their day. Because a lot of times we look at the Old Testament with a Christian perspective. You need to look at the Old Testament with an Old Testament Jewish perspective. When Christians do this, when Christians look at the Old Testament like it was written by Christians too, they are incorrect. They are wrong. They're just flat wrong. And for, the Vigilant Christian and Stephen Bancarz and all these people to say that Marcus is a heretic and et cetera, I don't necessarily, I wouldn't put him as a heretic. I wouldn't necessarily call him a heretic, because you guys are wrong as well. Because the Trinity is not in the Bible. It's an evolved idea. It's a man-made interpretation. But guess what? All of it is a man-made interpretation. The Bible was written by humans. The Bible is a man-made interpretation. But guess what? Do you know why the Bible is so important? Because it's God-inspired. That's why the Bible is such a great book. Not because God came down and he wrote the Bible or something like that, and every single tittle and jot and letter was written by Yahweh. Yahweh used humans, fallible humans at that. Yahweh used humans who make mistakes so they could write the Bible. And that's okay. Because that's how Christians should think of inspiration. We don't think of inspiration like Muslims, where our prophets were taken control of or something like that. Yahweh providentially allowed the prophets of the Old Testament and New Testament to use their own personalities, to use their own way of thinking, so they could relate certain ideas back to their culture and to their audience. And that's okay. What makes the Bible a unique book is the fact that not that God imposed some type of new thing, and God didn't give these people a brain blast where they knew about astrophysics or science, or they were just so higher learned than everybody else. They were geniuses. God is allowing these people to write down what he wants them to write down to a particular people at a particular time, using what they know, with the ideas they understand, so they can relay it back to their audience. That is how you should look at the Old Testament. And so hopefully I helped a lot of people out with this video. But to Vigilant Christian, Stephen Bancarz, and everybody in the oneness and oneness Pentecostal and Trinitarian debates, both of you guys are wrong. And both of you guys need to repent. Both of you guys need to humble yourselves. And maybe you guys can come to an agreement where you guys can have these discussions, where they can be gracious dialogue, where you both can learn from each other and you both can represent yourselves in a manner that's actually honorable and carry yourselves with some dignity. Because what I saw from both sides were people who are puffed up with pride, people who were very, a lot of their theology was emotionally based, and the scholarship and etc. was terrible. So this has been my presentation of the two powers of heaven, correcting Marcus Rogers and Stephen Bancarz. I'm done. All right, guys. Be sure to subscribe. Share this video around if you guys have learned something. If you guys learned something new, share this video on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and don't forget to subscribe. All right. Until next time, good luck and good night.